I'm glad you mentioned him, because his book, The Perennial Philosophy, had a profound effect on me. At the University of Chicago Divinity School, which was basically Protestant, mysticism was not in fashion then. In fact, they had a pretty low regard for it. I mean, 4 undergraduate years in philosophy of religion, 5 graduate, and hadn't read a mystic. That could not happen today. Mysticism is in, but then it was not. And I'm sure that the mystics were probably listed in the suggested reading list, but whoever gets around to that. But when I came upon the perennial philosophy, that changed my mind. And at Chicago, my mentor the phrase was naturalistic theist. That is, naturalistic meaning this universe that science tells about is all there is, and theist is to spot within nature in the broadest sense what is most important, and that we call divine. Well, I graduated from the University of Chicago, an ardent naturalistic theist, and then until I came upon the perennial philosophy.
The perennial philosophy is not comprised of writings by professional philosophers and scholars. It's an anthology featuring insights expressed by mystics and sages from different cultures and different times.
Many people have found the responses of the perennial philosophy as being extremely satisfying.
A professor of Islamic studies at George Washington University, Sayyid Nasser, sees the perennial philosophy at the heart of all traditional philosophies, tracing the phrase itself back to the 16th century.
The term itself was used for the first time in the West, as far as we know, by the librarian of the Library of the Vatican in the 16th century, Agostino Stoico, and was later on used by Leibniz. And everybody thought Leibniz had first used it. In one of his letters, Leibniz, the great German philosopher, writes that I don't follow this or that, I'm the follower of the Philosophia Perennis in Latin. The term was then claimed by many different groups. But the real, you might say, centrality of the perennial philosophy and its depth was demonstrated by the people who are called the traditional writers, starting by René Guénon, the great French metaphysician, and then Ananda Coomaraswamy, Fridtjof Schuon, others, all of whom have spoken of the perennial philosophy as understood as an perennial, in the sense non-historical, truth which has survived over the ages concerning the nature of reality, of the ultimate divine reality, of cosmic reality, and the macrocosmic reality, all of them, and which have manifested themselves in various great religious traditions in their sapiental aspect, whether it be the Vedanta or Islamic philosophy or Mahayana or Neo-Confucian philosophy in China, and Augustinianism and Thomism in the West, and so forth and so on. And this way of understanding the perennial philosophy was given a popular twist by the late British writer Aldous Huxley, who wrote the book called The Perennial Philosophy. He was not a perennialist in the sense that I am. That is, he did not really accept the traditional point of view, but he was interested in what he considered to be the perennial philosophy. And because he was a very famous novelist, when he brought out the book, The Perennial Philosophy, it made the term more popular.
As Huxley put it, the perennial philosophers are primarily concerned with liberation and enlightenment, helping others awaken to the divinity within and around them. It only took one reading of the perennial philosophy to dramatically change Houston Smith's outlook on life.
In that one reading, my naturalistic theism collapsed like a house of cards, and I've been a mystic. I should make a very important distinction in worldview, but attainment is another matter. And I don't make any great claim about being a mystic in attainment, but in understanding, that's my position.
It is not enough to talk about these things. We are a mind, but we're not only a mind. This doctrine, this truth, has to be wed to spiritual practice. And that is why Schuon oftentimes uses the term religio perennis. The religio perennis, or the Sophia perennis, in a sense complements the Philosophia perennis. Ultimately they're the same, but in order to avoid the error that we can sit down for the next 50 years and think about the ultimate reality and then think that we'll reach there. A spiritual life is much more complicated than that, and it requires of us our whole being and not only our mind.
The mystics speak, when they choose to speak, of the mystery of life, that which we can never fully comprehend. Houston Smith, in his effort to explain what the mystics represent, says that human beings are in essence transitional creatures.
Transitional creatures in that we need to understand intuitively, and more important, flood our lives with the fact that we have the breath of God. The divine spark is the most important element, and bring it to pervade our life. And to the extent that we succeed in doing that, then our lives are fulfilled. So that's the basic meaning of our being transitional creatures.
Houston Smith is not alone in thinking that there's a transitional quality to human nature. The futurist and filmmaker Peter Russell, who also has studied mysticism and religion, believes that they hold the key to understanding where we're heading as a species. He maintains that we're on the cusp of a significant transition in human evolution, being accelerated by the convergence of diverse cultures and religions.
For the first time in history, we have access to all the world's spiritual traditions. And if you were born 200 years ago, you just had access to those in your particular culture, and the only teachers you had would probably be any wise people that happened to be in your community. That was it, and perhaps reading some books. But even though then the books would have been from your own particular culture, now we have access to the world and all its spiritual traditions, and just in the last 30, 40, 50 years going back and really delving deeply into Eastern traditions, into Tibetan traditions, into Indian traditions, which we've only just recently discovered. I mean, in the last 200 years, but I think it's just the last 50 years we've actually really got in and begun to uncover what they're saying. And that I think is what's going to take us into our next evolutionary phase.